So disclosure, this is an ebook that I got off of the Project Gutenberg website. This is a free use, free ebook. Um, I went into a deep dive about copyright law in regards to books the other day, and I now know way more than I ever thought I would need to know. So yeah. So that's why, yeah. Gutenberg, yes, yes, exactly. No, Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg. All right, let's get started. Part 1, Chapter 1, A Shifting Reef. The year 1866 was signalized by a remarkable incident, a mysterious and puzzling phenomenon, which doubtless no one has yet forgotten. Hi Luna, how you doing? Welcome in. Not to mention rumors which agitated the maritime population and excited the public mind. Even in the interior of continents, seafaring men were particularly excited. Merchants, common sailors, captains of vessels, skippers, both of Europe and America, naval officers of all countries, and the governments of several states on the two continents. Where did the octopus come from? The octopus is my couch. It's a plushie. It's a plushie. No octopus were harmed in the making of my couch. I promise. Both Europe and America, naval officers of all countries, and the governments of several states on the two continents were deeply interested in the matter. For some time past, vessels had been met by an enormous thing, a long object, spindle-shaped and occasionally phosphorescent, and infinitely larger and more rapid in its movements than a whale. The facts relating to this apparition, entered into various logbooks, agreed in most respects as to the shape of the object or creature in question, the untiring rapidity of its movements, its surprising power of locomotion, and peculiar life with which it seemed endowed. If it was a crustacean, cetacean, oh my gosh, what? How many octopuses does it take to change a light bulb? 10. 10? How many would it take? I would think one, to be honest. Sedation. Oh my gosh, how do you say that one? Sedation. It surpassed in size all those hitherto classified in science, taking into consideration the mean of observations made at divers times, rejecting the timid estimate of those who assigned to this object a length of 200 feet, equally with the exaggerated opinions which set it down as a mile in width and 3 in length. We might fairly conclude that this mysterious being surpassed greatly all dimensions admitted by the ichthyologists of the day, if it existed at all, and that it did exist was an undeniable fact, and with that tendency which disposes of the human mind in favor of the marvelous, we can understand the excitement produced in the entire world by this supernatural apparition. As to casing it in the list of fables, the idea was out of the question. Did you bring your library card? No, oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. No worries, Luna. I'll get you a library card, Luna. It says admit Luna whenever Luna wants. Whenever she wants. On the 20th of July, 1866, the steamer Governor Higginson of the Calcutta and Burnock Steam Navigation Company had met this moving mass 5 miles off the east coast of Australia. Captain Baker thought at first he was in the presence of an unknown sandbank. He even prepared to determine its exact position when two columns of water, projected by the inexplicable object, shot with a hissing noise 150 feet up in the air. Now, unless the sandbank had been submitted to an intermittent eruption of a geyser, the Governor Higginson had to do neither more nor less than with an aquatic mammal, unknown till then, which threw up from its blowholes columns of water mixed with air and vapor. You're sorry, but the system is down. You cannot lend you these adult books. What do you mean? What do you mean? Similar facts were observed on the 23rd of July in the same year in the Pacific Ocean by the Columbus of the West India and Pacific Steam Navigation Company. But this extraordinary cetaceous creature could transport itself from one place to another with surprising velocity, as in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had observed it at two different points of the chart, separated by a distance of more than 700 nautical leagues. 15 days later, 2,000 miles further off, the Helvetia of the Compagnia Nationale and the Shannon of the Royal Mail Steamship Company, sailing to windward in that portion of the Atlantic lying between the United States and Europe, respectively signaled the monster to each other in 42 degrees 15 north latitude and 60 degrees 35 west longitude. In these simultaneous observations, they thought themselves justified in estimating the minimum length of the mammal at more than 350 feet, as the Shannon and Helveta were of similar dimensions than it, though they measured 300 feet overall. Now, the largest whales, those of which frequent those parts of the sea around the Aleutian, Kulamak, and Guliak Islands, have never exceeded the length of 60 yards if they attain that. These reports arriving one after the other, with fresh observations made on board the transatlantic ship Paris, a collision which occurred between the Etna of the Inman line and the monster, uh, process verbal directed by the officers of the French frigate Normandy, a very accurate survey made by the staff of the Commodore Fitzjames on board the Lord Clyde, greatly influenced by public opinion. Light thinking people jested upon the phenomenon, but grave practical countries such as England, America, and Germany treated the matter more seriously. In every place of great resorts, the monster was the fashion. They sang this bonk was brought to you by Tired Incorporated and has been top of the multi-dimensional market due to our focus on product quality and consumer satisfaction. Now, I could go on for another hour as to why we're the best, but let's let the product speak for itself. T's and C's apply should any unfortunate side effects such as brain damage occur due to the Tired Incorporated product outside a Tired Incorporated official building. The company will not be liable. Thanks. Thank you, Too Tired. In every place of great resort, the monster was the fashion. They sang of it in the cafes, ridiculed it in the papers, and represented it on the stage. All kinds of stories were circulated regarding it. There appeared in the papers caricatures of every gigantic and imaginary creature, from the white whale, the terrible Moby Dick of the Hyborian regions, to the immense kraken whose tentacles could entangle a ship of 500 tons and hurry it to the abyss of the ocean. Thank you for the follow. You need the books? Oh, hi Quantum, how you doing? You love getting your books read by Mama Cat. Thank you. Um, where was I? Kraken, right? Kraken and entangling. The legends of and hurry into the abyss of the ocean. The legends of ancient times were even resuscitated, and the opinions of Aristotle and Pliny revived, who admitted the existence of these monsters, as well as the Norwegian tales of Bishop Ontopian, the accounts of Paul Heged, and last of all, the reports of Mr. Harrington, whose good faith no one could suspect, who affirmed that, being on board the Castellan in 1857, he had seen this enormous serpent, which had never until that time frequented any other seas but those of the ancient Constitutionel. Hope everyone is having a good day. Let's play a game of what kind of librarian would you be? The definitely the uh like historical looking librarian, gothic librarian. Yeah. I thought of making getting some art commissioned of me dressed as like an old-timey librarian. Yeah, definitely shushing. Be that grouchy old guy who hates everybody. Ah, why? Then burst forth the interminable controversy between the credulous and incredulous in the societies of savants and the scientific journals. The question of the monster inflamed all minds. Editors of the scientific journals, quarreling with believers in the supernatural, spilled seas of ink during this memorable campaign, some even drawing blood. For from the sea serpent they became to direct personalities. For 6 months, war was waged with various fortune in the leading articles of the Graphical Institution of Brazil, the Royal Academy of Science of Berlin, the British Association, and the Smithsonian Institute of Washington in the discussions of the Indian archipelago, of the cosmos of the Abbe Mogno, in the oh my gosh, I cannot pronounce anything to save my life. In the Mythilungen of the Peterman, in the scientific chronicles of the great journals of France and other countries, the cheaper journals replied keenly and with inexhaustible zest. These satirical writers parried a remark of Linus, quoted by the adversaries of the monster, maintaining that nature did not make fools, and adjured their contemporaries not to give the lie to nature by admitting the existence of krakens, sea serpents, Moby Dicks, and other lubrications of delirious sailors. At length, an article in a well known satirical journal by a favorite contributor, the chief of the staff, settled the monster like Hippolytus, giving it the death blow amidst a universal burst of laughter. Wit had conquered science. Let me just take a drink here. During the first months of the year 1867, the question seemed buried, never to revive. When new facts were brought before the public, it was then no longer a scientific problem to be solved, but a real danger seriously to be avoided. The question took quite another shape. The monster became a small island, a rock, a reef, but a reef of indefinite and shifting proportions. I did briefly mute to drink water. I'm unmuted, right? Yeah. Hi, Alex. How you doing? Welcome in. I hope you're doing good. On the 5th of March, 1867, the Moravian of the Montreal Ocean Company, finding herself during the night in 27 degrees 30 latitude and 72 degrees 15 longitude, struck on her starboard quarter a rock marked in no chart for that part of the sea. Under the combined efforts of the wind and its 400 horsepower, it was going at the rate of 13 knots. Had it not been for the superior strength of the hull of the Moravian, she would have been broken by the shock and gone down with the 237 passengers she was bringing home from Canada. The accident happened about 5 o'clock in the morning as the day was breaking. The officers of the quarterdeck hurried to the after part of the vessel. They examined the sea with the most scrupulous attention. They saw nothing but a strong eddy about 3 cables' length distant, as if the surface had been violently agitated. The bearings of the place were taken exactly, and the Moravian continued its route without apparent damage. Had it struck a submerged rock or an enormous wreck? They could not tell, but on examination of the ship's bottom when undergoing repairs, it was found that part of her keel was broken. Horsepower mentioned, listening. Yeah, just chug the water unmuted. No, Sly. I'm trying to do the ASMR thing of, very thematic reading. And I don't need to drink under the water. That ruins the immersion. uh, This fact, so grave in and of itself, might perhaps have been forgotten like many others if 3 weeks after it had not been reenacted under similar circumstances. But thanks to the nationality of the victim of the shock, thanks to the reputation of the company to which the vessel belonged, the circumstance became extensively circulated. Chugging water is kind of ASMR. I drink bottled airs, not water. The 13th of April, 1867, the sea being beautiful, the breeze favorable, the Scotia of the Cunard's Company line found herself in 15 degrees 12 longitude and 45 degrees 37 latitude. She was going at the speed of 13 knots and a half. At 17 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, whilst the passengers were assembled at lunch in the great saloon, a slight shock was felt on the hull of the Scotia, on her quarter, a little aft of the port paddle. The Scotia had not struck, but she had been struck, and seemingly by something rather sharp and penetrating than blunt. The shock had been so slight that no one had been alarmed had it not been for the shouts of the carpenter's watch, who rushed on the bridge exclaiming, "We're sinking! We are sinking!" At first the passengers were much frightened, but Captain Anderson hastened to reassure them. The danger could not be imminent. The Scotia, divided into 7 compartments by strong partitions, could brave with impunity any leak. Captain Anderson went down immediately into the hold. He found that the sea was pouring into the 5th compartment, and the rapidity of the influx proved that the force of the water was considerable. Fortunately, this compartment did not hold the boilers, or the fires would have been immediately extinguished. Captain Anderson ordered the engines to be stopped at once, and one of the men went down to ascertain the extent of the injury. Some minutes afterwards, they discovered the existence of a large hole of 2 yards in diameter in the ship's bottom. Such a leak could not be stopped, and the Scotia, her paddles half submerged, was obliged to continue her course. She was then 300 miles from Cape Clear, and after 3 days' delay, which caused great uneasiness in Liverpool, she'd entered the basin of the company. The engineers visited the Scotia, which was put in dry dock. They could scarcely believe it possible. At 2 yards and a half below the water mark was a regular rent in the form of an isosceles triangle. The broken place in the iron plates was so perfectly defined that it could not have been more neatly done by a punch. It was clear, then, that the instrument producing the perforation was not of a common stamp, and after having been driven with prodigious strength in the piercing of an iron plate 1/3 inch thick, had withdrawn itself by a retrograde motion truly inexplicable. Hi Kirk, how you doing? Welcome in. Such was the last fact which resulted in exciting once more the torrent of public opinion. From this moment, all unlucky casualties which could not be otherwise accounted for were put down to the monster. On this imaginary creature rested the responsibility of all these shipwrecks, which unfortunately were considerable. For of 3,000 ships whose loss was annually recorded at Lloyd's, the number of sailing and steamships supposedly to be totally lost from the absence of all news amounted to not less than 200. Now it was the monster who, justly or unjustly, was accused of their disappearance, and thanks to it, communication between different continents became more and more dangerous. The public demanded preempted, preemptorily, that the seas should at any price be relieved from this formidable sedation. Cication. Emo only chat? No, no, no. I'm gonna need more water at this point. Need to keep hydrating myself. Hopefully everybody's doing good today. Able to relax and chill out. Have a nice chill night for once. Nice and calm. Chapter 2: Pro and Con. At the period when these events took place, I had just returned from a scientific research in the disagreeable territory of Nebraska in the United States. In virtue of my office as assistant professor in the Museum of Natural History in Paris, the French government had attached me to that expedition. Why would you be attached to an expedition in Nebraska if you're from Paris? That doesn't really make sense. What is going on in Nebraska? What what natural history is going on that would draw natural history of Paris? Is that a question for us? I guess. I mean, it's more of just a general question. It just seems odd. No idea. Yeah. Uh, leaves. Come back. Come back. I'll keep reading. In virtue of my office as assistant professor in the Museum of Natural History in Paris, the French government had attached me to that expedition. After 6 months in the. You're not reading the words in the book. Where are we? You gotta go sleep. Sorry you can't stay long. No worries, Kirk. I hope you get some good sleep. We're in chapter 2. We're like right here. Right here. After 6 months in Nebraska, I arrived in New York towards the end of March, laden with a precious collection. My departure for France was fixed for the first days in May. Meanwhile, I was occupying myself in classifying my mineralogical, botanical, and zoological riches when the accident happened to the Scotia. I was perfectly up. I was perfectly up in the subject, which was the question of the day. How could I be otherwise? I had read and reread all the American and European papers without being any nearer a conclusion. This mystery puzzled me. Under the impossibility of forming an opinion, I jumped from one extreme to the other. That there really was something that could not be doubted, and the incredulous were invited to put their finger on the wound of the Scotia. Upon my arrival at New York, the question was at its height. The hypothesis of the floating island and the unapproachable sandbank, supported by the minds of little competent to form a judgment, was abandoned. And indeed, unless this shoal had a machine in its stomach, how could it change its position with such astonishing rapidity? 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 Rapidity. From the same cause, the idea of a floating hull of an enormous wreck was given up. There remained only two possible solutions of the question, which created two distinct parties. On one side, those who were for a monster of colossal strength. On the other, those who were for a submarine vessel of enormous motive power. But this last hypothesis, plausible as it was, could not stand against inquiries made into both worlds. That a private gentleman should have such a machine at his command was not likely. Where, when, and how was it built? And how could its construction have been kept secret? Certainly, a government might possess such a destructive machine. And in these disastrous times, when the ingenuity of man had multiplied in the power of weapons of war, it was possible that, without the knowledge of others, a state might try to work such a formidable engine. And the chase pots came the torpedoes. After the chase pots came the torpedoes. After the torpedoes, the submarine rams. Then the reaction. At least I hope so. You thought the words were moving? No, it's the water. It's the water. You're trying to read through the water. I'm sorry, does it bother you? Because I can either hide the text or I can stop the water filter. That's fine. Okay. But the hypothesis of a war machine fell before the declaration of governments. As public interest was in question and transatlantic communication suffered, you just didn't notice it until now. I have it like set as mildly as possible, like on the mildest setting, so it doesn't like really trigger anybody. But if you're sensitive to it, it does get bothersome, especially on text. But the hypothesis of a war machine fell before the declaration of governments, as public interest was in question and transatlantic communications suffered. Their veracity could not be doubted. But how admit that the oh, but how admit that the construction of the submarine boat had escaped the public eye? Hi, Raptos, welcome in. Was my bra actually in the freezer? Did you find it? You thought your ADHD got an upgrade? It did. It now comes with water effects. That sentence is phrased slightly weird to me. Maybe it's just me. For a private gentleman to keep the secret under such circumstances would be very difficult. For a state whose every act is persistently watched by powerful rivals, certainly impossible. After inquiries made in England, France, Russia, Prussia, Spain, Italy, and America, even in Turkey, the hypothesis of a submarine monitor was definitely rejected. Upon my arrival in New York, several persons did me the honor of consulting me on the phenomenon in question. I had published in France a work in quarto in 2 volumes entitled Mysteries of the Great Submarine Grounds. This book, highly approved of in the learned world, gains for me a special reputation in this rather obscure branch of natural history. My advice was asked. As long as I could deny the reality of the fact, I confined myself to a decided negative. But soon, finding myself driven into a corner, I was obliged to explain myself categorically, and even the Honorable Pierre Arnaud Arnax, professor in the Museum of Paris, was called upon by the New York Herald to express a definite opinion of some sort. I did something. I spoke. For want of power to hold my tongue, I discuss the question in all its forms, publicly and politically and scientifically, and I give here an extract from a carefully studied article which I published in the number of the 30th of April. It ran as follow. Also, the fridge bra is copyrighted by your company, Slyco. Oh, you have this book in Romanian? Oh, nice. I need to get a hard copy of this book. I have it digitally in a couple of different devices, but I don't have it in hardback. I think we read it in school growing up, and I want to get like a nice pretty version to put on my bookshelf. Hard. Let me take some water. After examining one by one the different hypotheses, rejecting all other suggestions, it becomes necessary to admit the existence of a marine animal of enormous power. The great depths of the ocean are entirely unknown to us. Soundings cannot reach them. What passes in those remote depths will bring what beings live or can live 12 or 15 miles beneath the surface of waters. What is the organization of these animals? We can scarcely conjecture. However, the solution of the problem submitted to me may modify the form of the dilemma. Either we do know all the varieties of beings which people our planet, or we do not. If we do not know them all, if nature has still secrets in ichthyology for us, nothing is more comfortable to reason than to admit the existence of fishes, or cetaceans of other kinds, or even of new species, of an organization formed to inhabit the strata inaccessible to soundings, and which, in accident of some sort, either fantastical or capricious, has brought along at long intervals to the upper level of the ocean. If, on the contrary, we do know all living kinds, we must necessarily seek for the animal in question amongst those marine beings already classed, and in that case, I should be disposed to admit the existence of a gigantic narwhal. The common narwhal, or unicorn of the sea, often attains a length of 60 feet. Increase its size fivefold or tenfold, give it strength proportionate to its size, lengthen its destructive weapons, and you obtain the animal required. It will have the proportions determined by the officers of the Shannon, the instrument required by the perforation of the Scotia, and the power necessary to pierce the hull of the steamer. Indeed, the narwhal is armed with a sort of ivory sword, a halberd, according to the expression of certain naturalists. The principal tusk has the hardness of steel. Some of these tusks have been found buried in the bodies of whales, which the unicorn always attacks with success. Others have been drawn out, not without trouble, from the bottoms of ships, which they have pierced through and through as a gimlet piece pierces a barrel. The Museum of the Faculty of Medicine of Paris possesses one of these defensive weapons, 2 yards and a quarter in length, 15 inches in diameter at the base. Very well, suppose this weapon to be 6 times stronger and the animal 10 times more powerful. Launch it at the rate of 20 miles an hour, and you obtain a shock capable of producing the catastrophe required. Upon further information, therefore, I shall maintain it to be the sea unicorn of colossal dimensions, armed not with a halberd, but with a real spur, as the armored frigates or the rams of war, whose massiveness and motive power it would possess at the same time. Thus, may this puzzling phenomenon be explained, unless there to be something over and above all that one has ever conjectured, seen, perceived, or experienced, which is just within the bounds of possibility. These last words were cowardly on my part, but up to a certain point, I wished to shelter my dignity as professor and not give too much cause for laughter to the Americans, who laugh well when they do laugh. I reserved for myself a way of escape. In effect, however, I admitted the existence of the monster. My article was warmly discussed, which procured it a high reputation. It rallied round with a certain number of partisans. The solution it proposed gave at least full liberty to the imagination. The human mind delights in grand conceptions of supernatural beings, and the sea is precisely their best vehicle, the only medium through which these sea giants, against which terrestrial animals, such as elephants or rhinoceroses, are as nothing, can be produced or developed. The industrial and commercial papers treated the question chiefly from this point of view. The Shipping and Mercantile Gazette, the Lloyd's List, the Packet Boat, and the Maritime and Colonial Review, all papers devoted to the insurance companies which threatened to raise their rates of premium, were unanimous at this point. On this point, public opinion had been pronounced. The United States were the first in the field, and in New York they made preparations for an expedition destined to pursue this narwhal. A frigate of great speed, the Abraham Lincoln, was put in commission as soon as possible. The arsenals were opened to Commander Farragut, who hastened the arming of his frigate. But, as it always happens, the moment it was decided to pursue the monster did not appear. For 2 months, no one had heard it spoken of. No ship met with it. It seemed as if this unicorn knew of the plots weaving around it. It had been so much talked of, even through the Atlantic cable, that jesters pretended that this slender fly had stopped a telegram on its passage and was making the most of it. So when the frigate had been armed for a long campaign and provided with formidable fishing apparatus, no one could tell what course to pursue. Impatience grew apace when, on the 2nd of July, they learned that a steamer of the line of San Francisco from California to Shanghai had seen the animal 3 weeks before in the North Pacific Ocean. The excitement caused by this news was extreme. The ship was revictu- revic- revictuated? Revictuated. How do you say that? Revictualed, and well stocked with coal. It's like revictualed. You don't know what it means? I don't know what it means either. I feel like it's like recalled, but also like revicted. I'm like, what even is this word? I don't think. I know I've read this book before, but I don't remember what this word is. 3 hours before the Abraham Lincoln left Brooklyn Pier, I received a letter worded as follows: to M. Aronnax, professor in the Museum of Paris, Fifth Avenue Hotel, New York. Sir, if you will consent to join the Abraham Lincoln in this expedition, the government of the United States will, with pleasure, see France represented in the enterprise. Commander Farragut has a cabin at your disposal. Very cordially yours, J.B. Hobson, Secretary of Marine. It means to be supplied with a fresh stock of provisions, food, or essential. Oh, I was way off. So basically, resupplying. Got it. Revictualed. Oh, like victuals. Oh, victuals. Like provender victuals. Got it. Got it. I should have broke down the word a little bit more. Okay. Chapter 3. I form my resolution. 3 seconds before the arrival of J.B. Hobson's letter, I no more thought of pursuing the unicorn than of attempting the passage of the North Sea. 3 seconds after reading the letter of the Honorable Secretary of Marine, I felt that my true vocation, the sole end of my life, was to chase this disturbing monster and purge it from the world. But I had just returned from a fatiguing journey, weary and longing for repose. I guess Nebraska does that to you, huh? I aspired to nothing more than again seeing my country, my friends, my little lodging by the Jardin des Plantes, my dear and precious collections. But nothing could keep me back. I forgot all fatigue, friends, and collections, and accepted without hesitation the offer of the American government. Besides, I thought, all roads lead back to Europe for my particular benefit, and I will not hurry me towards the coast of France. You're off to bed so you can get up in 5 hours. All right, Raptos, I hope you get some good sleep. Uh, I will not hurry me towards the coast of France. This worthy animal may not allow itself to be caught in the seas of Europe for my particular benefit, and I will not bring back less than half a yard of his ivory halberd to the Museum of Natural History. But in the meanwhile, I must seek this narwhal in the North Pacific Ocean, which, to return to France, was taking on the road to Antipodes. Conseil, I called in an impatient voice. Conseil was my servant, a true, devoted Flemish boy who had accompanied me in all my travels. I liked him, and he returned my liking well. What does that even mean? You liked him and he returned your liking well? What does that mean? That sounds sus. When you read old literature with a healthy dose of what the fuck is going on, you know? I liked him and he returned the liking well. He was a phlegmatic by nature, regular from principle, zealous from habit, convincing little disturbance at the different surprises of life, very quick with his hands, and apt at any service required of him, and, despite his name, never giving advice, even when asked for it. Conseil had followed me for the last 10 years, wherever science led. Never once did he complain of the length or fatigue of a journey, never make an objection to pack his portmont, portmont? How do I say this one again? Portmanteau, or whatever country it might be, or however far away, whether China or Congo. Beside all this, he had good health, which defied all sickness, and solid muscles, but no nerves. Good morals are understood. This boy was 30 years old. This boy was 30 years old, and his age to that of his master as 15 to 20. May I be excused for saying that I was 40 years old? Why are you calling somebody 10 years your junior boy? Does anybody else find that weird? No? Just me? And he's commenting on the hands and the muscles and hmm hmm sus. Is this the and they were roommates thing? Ah, but Conseil had one fault. He was ceremonious to a degree. It would never speak to me but in third person, which was sometimes provoking. Is this BL? Conseil, I said again, beginning with feverish hands to make preparations for my departure. Certainly, I was sure of this devoted boy. As a rule, I never asked him if it were convenient for him or not to follow me in my travels. But this time the expedition in question might be prolonged, and the enterprise might be hazardous in pursuit of an animal capable of sinking a frigate as easily as a nutshell. Here there was matter for reflection even to the most impassive man in the world. What would Conseil say? Conseil, I called a third time. Conseil appeared. Did you call, sir? He said, entering. Yes, my boy. Make preparations for me and yourself too. We leave in 2 hours. As you please, sir, responded Conseil quietly. Not an instant to lose. Lock in my trunk all traveling utensils, coats, shirts, and stockings, without counting, as many as you can, and make haste. And your collections, sir? Observed Conseil. Well, I will think of them by and by. Wait, the Echitherium, the Hydrocutherium, the Oreodons, the Cheropotamus, and other skins, they will be kept at the hotel. And your live barbariosa, sir? Oh, live. What is a live babriosa? Babrusa? Babrusa. Babrusa sounds correct. They will feed it during our absence. Besides, I will give orders to forward our menagerie to France. We are not returning to Paris, then? Said Conseil. Oh, certainly, I answered evasively, by making a curve. Will the curve please you, sir? Oh, it will be nothing. Not quite so direct a route, that is all. We take our passage in the Abraham Lincoln. It says it right here. I have it highlighted. I did not make that line up. I promise you. I just read it in a sus voice. As you think proper, sir, coolly replied Conseil. You see, my friend, it has to do with the monster, the famous narwhal. We are going to purge it from the seas. The author of a work in quarto in 2 volumes on the mysteries of the great submarine grounds cannot forbear embarking with Commander Farragut. Yeah, a glorious mission, but a dangerous one. We cannot tell where we may go. These animals can be very capricious, but we will go whether or no. We have got a captain who is pretty wide awake. Boy is trying too hard. I opened a credit account for Babarusa and Conceal. Following, I jumped into a cab. Our luggage was transported to the deck of the frigate immediately. I hastened on board and asked for Commander Farragut. One of the sailors conducted me to the poop, where I found myself in the presence of a good-looking officer who held out his hand to me. Mm-hmm. Monsieur Pierre? Why did I forget how to say names like midway through? Pierre? Pierre Arnox? Pierre Aronnax, said he. Himself, replied I. Commander Farragut? You are welcome, Professor. Your cabin is ready for you. I bowed and desired to be conducted to the cabin destined for me. The Abraham Lincoln had been well chosen and equipped for her new destination. She was a frigate of great speed, fitted with high-pressure engines, which amounted to a pressure of 7 atmospheres. We're about to get ads in less than a minute, y'all. I will take a break during ads so everybody can still hear me. She was a frigate of great speed, fitted with high-pressure engines, which admitted a pressure of 7 atmospheres. Under this, the Abraham Lincoln attained the mean speed of nearly 8 knots and a third an hour. Considerable speed, but nevertheless insufficient to grapple with this gigantic cetacean. The interior arrangements of the frigate corresponded to its nautical qualities. I was well satisfied with my cabin, which was in the after part opening upon the gun room. And I will pause here until we get back from ads. Y'all enjoying the reading so far, hopefully. You have sub, you have no ads. Yeah, but I need to hydrate. I need to hydrate to keep reading. I'm gonna need to get more water in a little bit. Probably make some more tea at some point too. I look around, fish girl. What you mean? Oh, ads on a cat stream? When? I if this professor is Straight, I got news for you. How have you only just now noticed the giant octopus staring at you through my hair? He says, Reaper, Reaper, can you see me? You thought it was a rock? Yes, it is a rock. I promise, I promise. It's just a plush. It's just a plush. Lines. This is Ryan. This is my octopus Ryan. we liberated Ryan from an aquarium prison somewhere. Said Ryan, come be free. Come be free with us. Listen, I'm scared enough of the water. I don't need to catch feelings for an octopus to make it harder to stay away. What do you mean? He lives down the coral. Yeah. Yeah. Do a nice little stretch. Mm. Yeah, first thing this professor clocks when he meets the commander is he's good looking. He just got close beta for Into the Fire. Ooh, nice. Welcome back from ads, everybody. What's Into the Fire? I'm assuming it's a game. Pretty sure it's I'm 99% sure it's a game. I just didn't know what kind of game. Oh, fighting fire. Ooh, okay. The interior arrangements of the frigate corresponded to its nautical qualities. I was well satisfied with my cabin, which was in the after part upon opening upon the gunroom. Did they mean the aft part? I think they meant the aft part. We shall be well off here, said I to Consul. Also, did he even ask Consul if he would be okay with this, or did he just say, get in, Consul, we're getting on this ship? Because it seemed like he was having an internal monologue where, I wonder if I should ask Consul, and then just, proceeded to never ask and be like, Consul should be fine. It's fine, As well, by your honor's leave, as a hermit crab in the shell of a whelk, said Consul. I left Consil to stow our trunks conveniently away, and remounted the poop in order to survey the preparations for departure. Poop. At the moment Commander Farragut was ordering the last moorings to be cast loose, which held the Abraham Lincoln to the pier of the Brooklyn. Pier of the Brooklyn? Of Brooklyn. Of the Brooklyn. So in a quarter of an hour, perhaps less, the frigate would have sailed without me. I should have missed this extraordinary, supernatural, incredible expedition, the recital of which may well met with some skepticism. But Commander Farragut would not lose a day nor an hour in scouring the seas in which the animal had been sighted. He sent for the engineer. Is the steam full on? Asked he. Yes, sir, replied the engineer. Go ahead, cried Commander Farragut. The quay of Brooklyn, and all that part of New York bordering on the East River, was crowded with spectators. 3 cheers burst successively from 500,000 throats. Thousands of handkerchiefs were waved above the heads of the compact mass, saluting the Abraham Lincoln, until she reached the waters of the Hudson. at that point of the elongated peninsula which forms the town of New York. Then the frigate, following the coast of the New Jersey along the right bank of the beautiful river, covered with villas, passed between the forts which saluted her with their heaviest guns. The Abraham Lincoln answered by hoisting the American colors 3 times, whose 39 stars shone whose 39 stars shone resplendent from the mizzen peak, then modifying its speed to take the narrow channel marked by buoys placed in the inner bay formed by Sandy Hook Point. It coasted the long sandy beach, where where some thousands of spectators gave it one final cheer. The escort of boats and tenders still followed the frigate and did not leave her until they came abreast of the lightship, whose 2 lights marked the entrance of the New York Channel. Oh, Sly, that does sound like a fun game. 6 bells struck, and the pilot got into his boat and rejoined the little schooner, which was waiting under our lee. The fires were made up, the screw beat the waves more rapidly. The frigate skirted the low yellow coast of Long Island, and at 8 bells, after having lost sight in the northwest of the lights of Fire Island, she ran at full steam onto the dark waves of the Atlantic. Chapter 4: Ned Land. Captain Farragut was a good seaman, worthy of the frigate he commanded. His vessel and he were one. He was the soul of it. On the question of the cetacean, there was no doubt in his mind, and he would not allow the existence of the animal to be disputed on board. He believed in it, as certain good women believe in the Leviathan, by faith, not by reason. The monster did exist, and he had sworn to get rid of it. He was kind of a knight of Rhodes, a second Dion de Gozan, going to meet the serpent which desolated the island. Either Captain Farragut would kill the narwhal, or the narwhal would kill the captain. There was no third course. The officers on board shared the opinion of their chief. They were ever chatting, discussing, and calculating the various chances of meeting, watching narrowly the vast surface of the ocean. More than one took up his quarters voluntarily in the cross trees, who would have cursed such a berth under any other circumstances. As long as the sun described its daily course, the rigging was crowded with sailors, whose feet were burnt to such an extent by the heat of the deck as to render it unbearable. Still, the Abraham Lincoln had not yet breasted the suspected waters of the Pacific. As to the ship's company, they desired nothing better than to meet the Unicorn, to harpoon it, to hoist it on board, and dispatch it. They watched the sea with eager attention. Ah, thank you, thank you. Probably I'm gonna try to get the controls working for Resident Evil 1 so I can try and finish that until I crash out on it again. Besides, Captain Farragut had spoken of a certain sum of $2,000 set apart for whoever should first sight the monster, were he cabin boy, common seaman, or officer. I leave you to judge how eyes were used on board the Abraham Lincoln. For my own part, I was not behind the others and left to no one my share of daily observations. The frigate might have been called the Argus for 100 reasons. Only one amongst us, Conseil, seemed to protest by his indifference against the question which so interested us all, and seemed to be out of keeping with the general enthusiasm on board. I have said that Captain Farragut had carefully provided his ship with every apparatus for catching the giant cetacean. No whaler had ever been better armed. We possessed every known engine, from the harpoon thrown by hand to the barbed arrows of the blunderbuss and the explosive balls of the duck gun. What is a duck gun? Not a deck gun, it's a duck gun. Okay, does it quack? On the forecastle lay the perfection of the breech loading gun, very thick at the breech, very narrow in the bore, the model of which had been in the expedition of 1867. This precious weapon of American origin could throw with ease a conical projectile of 9 pounds to a mean distance of 10 miles. Thus, the Abraham Lincoln wanted for no means of destruction, and, what was better still, she had on board Ned Land, the prince of harpooners. Ned Land was a Canadian with an uncommon quickness of hand, and who knew no equal in his dangerous occupation. Skill, coolness, audacity, and cunning he possessed in a superior degree, and it must be a cunning whale or a singularly cute cachalot to escape a stroke of his harpoon. Ned Land was about 40 years of age. He was a tall man, more than 6 feet high, strongly built, grave and taciturn, occasionally violent, and very passionate when contradicted. His person attracted attention, but above all the boldness of his look, which gave regular expression to his face. Who calls himself Canadian calls himself French, and little communicative as Ned Land was, I must admit that he took a certain liking for me. My nationality drew him to me, no doubt. It was an opportunity for him to talk, and for me to hear that old language, rebellious. This is definitely French, which I cannot pronounce to save my life, which is still in use in some Canadian provinces. The harpooner's family was originally from Quebec and was already a tribe of hardy fishermen when this town belonged to France. Little by little, Ned Land acquired a taste for chatting, and I loved to hear the recital of his adventures in the polar seas. He related his fishing and his combats with natural poetry of expression. His recital took the form of an epic poem, and I seemed to be listening to a Canadian Homer singing the Iliad from the regions of the north. I am portraying this hardy companion as I really knew him. We are old friends now, united in that unchangeable friendship which is born and cemented amidst extreme dangers. Ah, brave Ned, I could ask no more than to live 100 years longer, that I may have had more time to dwell the longer on your memory. Oh boy. Now, what was Ned Land's opinion upon the question of the maritime monster? I must admit that he did not believe in the unicorn, and was the only one on board who did not kiss him. I know, right? I must admit that he did not believe in the unicorn, and was the only one on board who did not share that universal conviction. He even avoided the subject, which I one day thought it was my duty to press upon him. One magnificent evening, the 30th of July, that is to say, 3 weeks after our departure. Sure, they meant the weather, but I'm going to interpret this a different way. The frigate was abreast of Cape Blanc, 30 miles to leeward the coast of Patagonia. We had crossed the Tropic of Capricorn, and the Straits of Magellan opened less than 700 miles to the south. Before 8 days were over, the Abraham Lincoln would be plowing the waters of the Pacific. Seated on the poop, Ned Land and I were chatting of one thing and another as we looked at this mysterious sea whose great depths had up to this time been inaccessible to the eye of man. I naturally led up the conversation to the giant unicorn and examined the various chances of success or failure of the expedition. But seeing that Ned Land let me speak without saying too much himself, I pressed him more closely. Thank you for the quote. Well, Ned, said I, is it possible that you are not convinced of the existence of the cetacean that we are following? Have you any peculiar reason? Have you any particular reason for being so incredulous? The harpooner looked at me fixedly for some moments before answering, struck his broad forehead with his hand, a habit of his, as if to collect himself, and said at last, perhaps I have Aronnax? Arnox? Aronnax. Aronnax? Aronnax. How should I say this guy's name? Aronnax. He really says his name, Aronnax, or is he saying it Monsieur Aronnax? I think he's saying it Monsieur Aronnax. That makes more sense, yeah? Because just call him Arnie. I feel like just M is Monsieur, the abbreviation for Monsieur in French. Because it's not Mr., so I believe it's just Monsieur. Because I remember Mademoiselle, so I think it's Monsieur. Monsieur Aronnax. But, Ned, you, a whaler by profession, familiarized with all the great marine mammalia, you, whose imagination might easily accept the hypothesis of enormous cetaceans, you ought to be the last to doubt under such circumstances. That is just what deceives you, Professor, replied Ned, that the vulgar should believe in extraordinary comets traversing space, and in the existence of antediluvian monsters in the heart of the globe may well be, but neither astronomer nor geologist believes in such chimeras. As a whaler, I have followed many a cetacean, harpooned a great number, and killed several, but however strong or well armed they have been, neither their tails nor their weapons would have been able to even scratch the iron plates of a steamer. But Ned, they tell of ships which the teeth of the narwhal have pierced through and through. Wooden ships, that is possible, replied the Canadian. But I have never seen it done, and until further proof, I deny that whales, cetaceans, or sea unicorns could ever produce the effect you describe. Well, Ned, I repeat it with a conviction resting on the logic of facts. I believe in the existence of a mammal powerfully organized, belonging to the branch of vertebrata, like the whales or the cachalots or dolphins, furnished with a horn of defense of great penetrating power. Said the harpooner, shaking his head with the air of a man who would not be convinced. Notice one thing, my worthy Canadian, I resumed. If such an animal is in existence, if it inhabits the depths of the ocean, if it frequents the strata lying miles below the surface of the water, it must necessarily possess an organization the strength of which would defy all comparison. And why this powerful organization? Demanded Ned. Because it requires incalculable strength to keep oneself in these strata and resist their pressure. Listen to me. Let us admit that the pressure of the atmosphere is represented by the weight of a column of water, 32 feet high. And the reality of the column of water would be shorter, as we are speaking of seawater, the density of which is greater than that of fresh water. Very well. When you dive, Ned, as many times as 32 feet of water as there are above you, so many times does your body bear a pressure equal to that of the atmosphere. That is to say, 15 pounds for each square inch of its surface. It follows, then, that at 320 feet, this pressure equals that of 10 atmospheres. Of 100 atmospheres at 3,200 feet, and of 1,000 atmospheres at 32,000 feet. That is about 6 miles, which is equivalent to saying that if you could attain this depth in the ocean, each square 3/8 of an inch of the surface of your body would bear the pressure of 5,600 pounds. Ah, my brave Ned, do you know how many square inches you carry on the surface of your body? I have no idea, Mr. Arnax. About 6,500. And as in reality, the atmospheric pressure is about 15 pounds to the square inch. Your 6,500 square inches bear at this moment a pressure of 97,500 pounds. Without my perceiving it? Without your perceiving it. And if you are not crushed by such a pressure, it is because the air penetrates the interior of your body with equal pressure. Thank you for the follow. Hence, perfect equilibrium with the interior and exterior pressure, which thus neutralize each other, which allows you to bear with it without inconvenience. But in the water, it is another thing. Yes, I understand, replied Ned, becoming more attentive, because the water surrounds me but does not penetrate. Precisely, Ned. So that at 32 feet beneath the surface of the sea, you would undergo a pressure of 97,500 pounds. At 320 feet, 10 times that pressure. At 3,200 feet, 100 times that pressure. Lastly, at 32,000 feet, 1,000 times that pressure would be 97,500,000 pounds. That is to say, you would be flattened as if you had been drawn from the plates of a hydraulic machine. The devil, explained Ned. Very well, my worthy harpooner. Harpooner? Harpooner? Harpooner. If some vertebrate, several hundred yards long and large in proportion, can maintain itself in such depths, of those whose surface is represented by millions of square inches, that is, by tens of millions of pounds, we must estimate the pressure they undergo. Consider then what must be the resistance of their bony structure and the strength of their organization to withstand such pressure. Why, explained Ned Land, they must be made of iron plates 8 inches thick like the armored frigates. Fun fact, did you know that an orca produces 19,000 psi per square inch in one bite? That is more psi than a T Rex, since a T Rex only produces 12,000 psi. I did not know that. Thank you. Thank you, Walking Corpse. Walking Corpse? 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 Oh. The Walking Corpse. How do you like shift the S to the end of the word? That's an interesting way because it's still pronounced the same, right? The walking corpse. Interesting. Sorry, random thought invaded my brain. Let me drink some more tea. Okay, corpse. That name sounds like a threat. As you say, Ned, and think what destruction such a mass would cause if hurled with the speed of an express train against the hull of a vessel. Yes, certainly, perhaps, replied the Canadian, shaken by these figures, but not yet willing to give in. Well, have I convinced you? You have convinced me of one thing, sir, which is that if such animals do exist at the bottom of the seas, they must necessarily be as strong as you say. But if they do not exist, my obstinate harpooner, how explain the accident to the Scotia? Chapter 5 At a Venture. The voyage of the Abraham Lincoln was for a long time marked by no special incident, but one circumstance happened which slowed the wonderful dexterity of Ned Land and proved what confidence we might place in him. On the 30th of June, the frigate spoke with some American whalers, from whom we learned that they knew nothing about the narwhal, but one of them, the captain of the Monroe, knowing that Ned Land had shipped on board the Abraham Lincoln, begged for his help chasing a whale they had in sight. Commander Farragut, desirous of seeing Ned Land at work, gave him permission to go on board the Monroe, and fate served our Canadian so well. Instead of one whale, he harpooned two with a double blow, striking one straight to the heart and catching the other after some minutes' pursuit. Decidedly, if the monster ever had to do with him, Decidedly, if the monster ever had to do with Ned Land's harpoon, I would not bet on its favor. The frigate skirted the southeast coast of America with great rapidity. The 3rd of July, we were at the opening of the Straits of Magellan, level with Cape Farragus. But Commander Farragut would not take a tortuous passage, but doubled Cape Horn. The ship's crew agreed with him, and certainly it was possible that they might meet the narwhal in this narrow pass. Many of the sailors affirmed that the monster could not pass here. He was too big for that. The 6th of July, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Wait, if the creature is too big, how did the creature get to the other side of the ocean? Did he go the polar route then? Make it make sense if the creature didn't go through the south, because this is pre-Panama Canal, right? So, and the creature would probably be too big for the canal. So if not going around Cape Horn, around South America, then it would have to go around the top of North America, the polar route. So, how shallow is it? I would think it would be fine, right? The 6th of July, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Abraham Lincoln, at 15 miles to the south, doubled the solitary island, this lost rock at the extremity of the American continent, to which some Dutch sailors gave the name of their native town, Cape Horn. The course was taken towards the northwest, and the next day the screw of the frigate was at last beating the waters of the Pacific. Keep your eyes open, called the sailors, and they were opened widely, both eyes and glasses, a little dazzled, it is true, by the prospect of $2,000, had not an instant's repose. That's not what I said. That's not what I said. Is that what the caption said I said? That's not what I said. Cape Horn. You weirdos. That's what you heard. That's not what I said. They were opened widely, both eyes and glasses, a little dazzled, it is true, by the prospect of $2,000, had not an instant's repose. Day and night they watched the surface of the ocean, and even nactylopes, whose faculty of seeing in the darkness multiplies their chances 100-fold, would have had enough to do to gain the prize. I myself, for whom money had no charms, la-di-da, aren't we fancy, was not the least attentive on board, but giving but a few minutes to my meals, but a few hours to sleep, indifferent to either rain nor sunshine, I did not leave the poop of the vessel. This guy really loves his poop. Now leaning on the netting of the forecastle, now on the taffrail, I devoured with eagerness the soft foam which whitened the sea as far as the eye could reach. And how often I have shared the emotion of the majority of the crew when some capricious whale raised its black back above the waves. The poop of the vessel was crowded in a moment. The cabins poured forth a torrent of sailors and officers, each with heaving breast and troubled eye watching the course of the cetacean. I looked and looked till I was nearly blind, whilst Consul, always phlegmatic, kept repeating in a calm voice, "If, sir, you would not squint so much, you would see better." With vain excitement, Abraham Lincoln checked its speed and made for the animal. signaled a simple whale or common chassalot, which soon disappeared amidst a storm of excretion. But the weather was good. The voyage was being accomplished under the most favorable auspices. It was then the bad season in Australia, the July of that zone corresponding to our January in Europe. But the sea was beautiful and easily scanned round a vast circumference. Why are their breasts heaving? Because they were panting because they ran all the way up to the deck. They were out of breath, so they were heaving, you know? It's just okay porn. What were you saying, Sly? Sorry, I couldn't resist. The 20th of July, the Tropic of Capricorn was cut by 105 of longitude, and the 27th of the same month we crossed the equator on the 110th meridian. This passed, the frigate took more decidedly westerly direction, and scoured the central waters of the Pacific. Commander Farragut thought, and with reason, that it was better to remain in deep water and keep clear of continents or islands, which the beast itself seemed to shun, perhaps because there was not enough water for him, suggested the greater part of the crew. The frigate passed at some distance from the Marquesas and the Sandwich Islands, crossed the Tropic of Cancer. Hi, Lalacita. How you doing? And made for the China Seas. We were on the theater of the last diversions of the monster, and, to say truth, we no longer lived on board. Hearts palpitated, fearfully preparing themselves for future incurable aneurysm. The entire ship's crew were undergoing a nervous excitement of which I can give no idea. They could not eat. They could not sleep. 20 times a day, a misconception or optical illusion of some sailor seated on the taffrail would cause a dreadful perspirations. And these emotions, 20 times repeated, kept us in a state of excitement so violent that a reaction was unavoidable. And truly, reaction soon showed itself. For 3 months, during which a day seemed an age, the Abraham Lincoln furrowed all the waters of the North Pacific, running at whales, making sharp deviations from her course, veering suddenly from one tack to another, stopping suddenly, putting on steam, and backing ever and anon at the risk of deranging her machinery, and not one point of the Japanese or American coast was left unexplored. The warmest partisans of the enterprise now became its most ardent detractors. Reaction mounted from the crew to the captain himself, and certainly it had not been for the resolute determination of Captain Farragut, the frigate would have headed due southward. This useless search could not last much longer. The Abraham Lincoln had nothing to reproach herself with. She had done her best to succeed. Never had an American ship's crew shown more zeal or patience. Its failure could not be placed to their charge. There remained nothing but to return. This was represented to the commander. The sailors could not hide their discontent, and the service suffered. I will not say there was a mutiny on board, but after a reasonable period of obstinacy, Captain Farragut, as Columbus did, asked for 3 days' patience. If in 3 days the monster did not appear, the man at the helm should give 3 turns of the wheel, and the Abraham Lincoln would make for the European seas. This promise was made on the 2nd of November. It had the effect of rallying the ship's crew. The ocean was watched with renewed attention. Each one wished for a last glance in which to sum up his remembrance. Glasses were used with feverish activity. It was a grand defiance given to the giant narwhal, and he could scarcely fail to answer the summons and appear. 2 days passed, and the steam was at half pressure. 1,000 schemes were tied to attract attention and stimulate the apathy of the animal in case it should be met in those parts. Large quantities of bacon were trailed in the wake of the ship to the great satisfaction, I must say, of the sharks. Small craft radiated in all directions around the Abraham Lincoln as she lay to, and did not leave a spot of sea unexplored. But the night of the 4th of November arrived without the unveiling of this submarine mystery. Thank you for the redeems, Lalacita. Yes, yes, that is very true. That is very true, Shep. You could do that. I want to feed bacon to sharks because that seems like a smart thing to do. Just let bacon trail from my ship for the sharks. That's definitely a good idea, right, y'all? The next day, oh, yeah, I was just, Lolacita was just raining things on my head. Doesn't have the same effect when everything's muted, I know. The next day, the 5th of November, at 12, the delay would, morally speaking, expire. At that time, Commander Farragut, faithful to his promise, was to turn the course to the southeast and abandon forever the northern regions of the Pacific. The frigate was then in 31 degrees 15 north latitude and 136 degrees 42 east longitude. The coast of Japan still remained less than 200 miles to the leeward. Night was approaching. They had just struck 8 bells. Large clouds veiled the face of the moon. Then, in its first quarter, the sea undulated peacefully under the stern of the vessel. At that moment, I was leaning forward on the starboard netting. Conseil, standing near me, was looking straight before him. The crew, perched in the ratlines, examined the horizon, which contracted and darkened by degrees. Officers with their night glasses scouring the glowing darkness. Sometimes the ocean sparkled under the rays of the moon, which darted between two clouds. Then all trace of light was lost in the darkness. And looking at Conseil, I could see he was undergoing a little of the general influence. At least I thought so. Perhaps for the first time, his nerves vibrated to a sentiment of curiosity. Come, Conseil, said I. This is the last chance of pocketing $2,000. May I be permitted to say, sir, replied Conseil, that I never reckoned on getting the prize, and had the government of the Union offered $100,000, it would have been none the poorer. You are right, Conseil. It is a foolish affair, after all, and one upon which we will enter too lightly. What time lost! What useless emotions! We should have been back in France 6 months ago. In your little room, sir, replied Conseil, and in your museum, sir, and I should have already classed all your fossils, sir, and the babirusa would have been installed in its cage in the Jardin des Plantes, and have drawn all curious people of the capital. As you say, Conseil, I fancy we shall run a fair chance of being laughed at for our pains. That's tolerably certain, replied Conseil quietly. I think they will make fun of you, sir, And must I say it? Go on, my good friend. Well, sir, you will only get your deserts. Indeed. When one has the honor of being a savant as you are, sir, one should not expose oneself to. Conceal had not time to finish his compliment. In the midst of general silence, a voice had just been heard. It was the voice of Ned Land shouting, "Look out there! Very thing we are looking for on our weather beam." Chapter 6, At Full Steam. At this cry, the whole ship's crew hurried towards the harpooner. Commander, officers, masters, sailors, cabin boys, even the engineers left their engines, and the stokers their furnaces. The order to stop her had been given, and the frigate now simply went on by her own momentum. The darkness was profound, and however good the Canadian's eyes were, I asked myself, how had he managed to see, and what had he been able to see? My heart beat as if it would break, but Ned was not mistaken, and we all perceived the object he pointed to. At 2 cables' length from the Abraham Lincoln on the starboard quarter, the sea seemed to be illuminated all over. It was not a mere phosphoric phenomenon. The monster emerged some fathoms from the water, and then threw out that very intense but inexplicable light mentioned in the report of several captains. This magnificent irradiation must have been produced by an agent of great shining power. The luminous part traced on the sea of an immense oval, much elongated, the center of which condensed a burning heat whose overpowering brilliancy died out by successive gradations. "It is only an agglomeration of phosphoric particles," cried one of the officers. "No, sir, certainly not," I replied. "Never did Pallades or Cepheid produce such a powerful light. That brightness is of an essentially electrical nature. Besides, see, it moves. It is moving forwards, backwards. It is darting toward us." A general cry rose from the frigate. "Silence," said the captain. "Up with the helm, reverse the engines." The steam was shut off, and the Abraham Lincoln, beating to port, described a semicircle. Why is it describing what it's doing? Doesn't it just do the thing? "Right the helm, go ahead," cried the captain. These orders were executed, and the frigate moved rapidly from the burning light. I was mistaken. She tried to sheer off, but the supernatural animal approached with a velocity double her own. We gasped for breath. Stupefaction more than fear made us dumb and motionless. The animal gained on us, sporting with the waves. It made the round of the frigate, which was then making 14 knots, and enveloped it with electric rings like luminous dust. Then it moved away 2 or 3 miles, leaving a phosphorescent track, like those volumes of steam that the express trains leave behind. All at once, from the dark line of the horizon, whither it retired to gain its momentum, the monster rushed suddenly towards the Abraham Lincoln with alarming rapidity, stopped suddenly about 20 feet from the hull, and died out, not diving under the water, for its brilliancy did not abate, but suddenly, as if the source of brilliant emanation was exhausted. Then it reappeared on the other side of the vessel, as if it had turned and slid under the hull. Any moment a collision might have occurred which would have been fatal to us. "Hi, Sasha. How you doing? Have a good night." Then it reappeared on the other side of the vessel, as if it had turned and slid under the hull. Any moment a collision might have occurred which would have been fatal to us. However, I was astonished at the maneuvers of the frigate. She fled and did not attack. On the captain's face, generally so impassive, was an expression of unaccountable astonishment. "Monsieur Arnox," he said, "I do not know with what formidable being I have to deal, and I will not imprudently risk my frigate in the midst of this darkness. Besides, how to attack this unknown thing, how to defend oneself from it, Wait for daylight and the scene will change. You have no further doubt, Captain, of the nature of the animal? No, sir. It is evidently a gigantic narwhal and an electric one. Perhaps, I, one can only approach with a gymnotus or a torpedo. Undoubtedly, replied the captain. If it possesses such dreadful power, it is the most terrible animal that was ever created. That is why, sir, I must be on my guard. The crew were on their feet all night. No one thought of sleep. The Abraham Lincoln, not being able to struggle with such velocity, had moderated its pace and sailed at half speed. For its part, the narwhal, imitating the frigate, let the waves rock it at will and seemed decided not to leave the scene of the struggle. Towards midnight, however, it disappeared, or, to use a more appropriate term, it died out like a large glowworm. Had it fled? One could only fear, not hope. But at 7 minutes to 1 o'clock in the morning, a deafening whistling was heard, like that produced by a body of water rushing with great violence. The captain, Ned Land, and I were then on the poop, eagerly peering through the profound darkness. Ned Land, asked the commander, you have oft heard the roaring of whales? Often, sir, but never such whales, the sight of which brought me in $2,000. But if I could only approach with horror four harpoon, if I can only approach within 4 harpoon lengths of it. But to approach it, said the commander, I ought to put in a whaler at your disposal? Certainly, sir. That will be trifling with the lives of my men. And mine too, simply said the harpooner. Towards 2 o'clock in the morning, the burning light reappeared, not less intense, about 5 miles to windward of the Abraham Lincoln. Notwithstanding the distance, the noise of the wind and sea, one heard distinctly loud strokes of the animal's tail, and even its panting breath. It seemed that, at the moment, the enormous narwhal had come to take breath at the surface of the water. The air was engulfed in its lungs like the steam in the vast cylinders of a machine of 2,000 horsepower. Thought I, a whale with the strength of a cavalry regiment would be a pretty whale. We were on the qui vive till daylight, and prepared for the combat. The fishing implements were laid along the hammock nettings. The second lieutenant loaded the blunderbusses, which could throw harpoons to the distance of a mile, the long duck guns with explosive bullets, which inflicted mortal wounds even to the most terrible animals. Ned Land contented himself with sharpening his harpoon, a terrible weapon in his hands. At 6 o'clock, day began to break, and, with the first glimmer of light, the electrical light of the narwhal disappeared. At 7 o'clock, the day was sufficiently advanced, but a very thick sea fog obscured our view, and the best spyglasses could not pierce it. That caused disappointment and anger. I climbed the mizzenmast. Some officers were already perched on the mastheads. At 8 o'clock, the fog lay heavy on the waves, and its thick scrolls rose little by little. The horizon grew wider and clearer at the same time. Suddenly, just as on the day before, Ned Land's voice was heard. The thing itself on the port quarter, cried the harpooner. Every eye was turned towards the point indicated. There, a mile and a half from the frigate, was a blackish body emerging a yard above the waves. Its tail, violently agitated, produced a considerable eddy. Never did a caudal appendage beat the sea with such violence. An immense track of dazzling whiteness marked the passage of the animal, and described a long curve. The frigate approached the cetacean. I examined it thoroughly. The reports of the Shannon and of the Helvetia had rather exaggerated its size, and I estimated its length at only 250 feet. As to its dimensions, I could only conjecture them to be admirably proportioned. While I watched this phenomenon, two jets of steam and water were ejected from its vents and rose to the height of 120 feet. Thus, I ascertained its way of breathing. I concluded definitely that it belonged to the vertebrate branch, class Mammalia. The crew waited impatiently for their chief's orders. The latter, after having observed the animal attentively, called the engineer. The engineer ran to him. "Sir," said the commander, "you have steam up?" "Yes, sir," answered the engineer. "Well, make up your fires and put on all steam." Three hurrahs greeted this order. The time for struggle had arrived. Some moments after, the two funnels of the frigate vomited torrents of black smoke, and the bridge quaked under the trembling of the boilers. The Abraham Lincoln, propelled by her wonderful screw, went straight at the animal. The latter allowed it to come within half a cable's length. Then, as if disdaining to dive, it took a little turn and stopped a short distance off. This pursuit lasted nearly 3/4 of an hour, without the frigate gaining 2 yards on the cetacean. It was quite evident that at the rate we should never come up with it. "Well, Mr. Land," asked the captain, "do you advise me to put the boats out to sea?" "No, sir," replied Ned Land, "because we shall not take that beast easily." "What shall we do then?" "Put on more steam if you can, sir." "With your leave, I mean to post myself under the bowsprit, and if we can get within harpooning distance, I shall throw my harpoon." "Go, Ned," said the captain. "Engineer, put on more pressure." Ned Land went to his post. The fires were increased, the screw revolved 43 times a minute, and the steam poured out of the valves. We heaved the log and calculated that the Abraham Lincoln was going at the rate of 18.5 miles an hour. But the accursed animal swam too at the rate of 18.5 miles an hour. For a whole hour, the frigate kept up this pace without gaining 6 feet. It was humiliating for one of the swiftest sailors in the American Navy. Stubborn anger seized the crew. The sailors abused the monster, who, as before, disdained to answer them. The captain no longer contented himself with twisting his beard. He gnawed it. The engineer was again called. "You have turned full steam in?" "Yes, sir," replied the engineer. The speed of the Abraham Lincoln increased. Its masts trembled down their stepping holes, and the clouds of smoke could hardly find way out of the narrow funnels. They heaved the log a second time. "Well?" asked the captain of the man at the wheel. 19 miles and 3/10, sir." "Clap on more steam." The engineer obeyed. The manometer showed 10 degrees, but the cetacean grew warm itself, no doubt, without straining itself. It made 19 3/10. What a pursuit! No, I cannot describe that emotion that vibrated through me. Ned Land kept his post, harpoon in hand. Several times the animal let us gain upon it. "We shall catch it, we shall catch it," cried the Canadian. But just as he was going to strike, the cetacean stole away with a rapidity that could not be estimated. At less than 30 miles an hour, and even during our maximum of speed, it bullied the frigate, going round and round it. A cry of fury broke from everyone. At noon, we were no further advanced than at 8 o'clock in the morning. The captain then decided to take more direct means. "Ah," said he, "the animal goes quicker than the Abraham Lincoln. Very well, we will see whether it will escape these conical bullets. Send your men to the forecastle, sir." The forecastle gun was immediately loaded and slewed round, but the shot passed some feet above the cetacean, which was half a mile off. "Another, more to the right," cried the commander, "and $5 to whoever will hit that infernal beast." The old gunner with a gray beard, that I can see now, with steady eye and grave face, went up to the gun and took a long aim. A loud report was heard, with which we were mingled with the cheers of the crew. A whole $5, I know. Anybody wanna run how much that would be in today's money? This is the 1800s. Look, it's a swivel cannon. They were using the swivel cannon. Isn't that cute? Little swivel cannon. The bullet did its work. It hit the animal, but not fatally. Sliding off the rounded surface, was lost in 2 miles deep depth of sea. The chase began again, and the captain, leaning towards me, said, "I will pursue that beast till my frigate bursts up." "Yes," answered I, "and you will be quite right to do it. I wish the beast would exhaust itself and not be insensible to fatigue like a steam engine." But it was of no use. Hours passed, and without it showing any signs of exhaustion. However, it must be said in praise of the Abraham Lincoln that she struggled on indefatigably, blah, 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 in, indefatigably. There we go. I cannot reckon the distance she made under 300 miles during this unlucky day, November the 6th. But night came on and overshadowed the rough ocean. Now I thought our expedition was at an end and that we should never again see the extraordinary animal. I was mistaken. At 10 minutes to 11 in the evening, the electric light reappeared 3 miles to windward of the frigate, as pure, as intense as during the preceding night. Your favorite line, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, thank you. I'll be here. I'll be here, forever just to say blah, blah, blah. If the narwhal seemed motionless, perhaps tired with its day's work. It slept, letting itself float with the undulation of the waves. Now was a chance of which the captain resolved to take advantage. He gave his orders. The Abraham Lincoln kept up half steam, and advanced cautiously so as not to awake its adversary. It is no rare thing to meet in the middle of the ocean whales so sound asleep that they can be successfully attacked, and Ned Land had harpooned more than one during its sleep. The Canadian went to take his place again under the bowsprit. Thank you for the follow. Oh, so $5 is between like 100 and $150 in today's. Nice, nice. The frigate approached noiselessly, stopped at 2 cables' length from the animal, and following its track. No one breathed. A deep silence reigned on the bridge. We were not 100 feet from burning focus, the light of which increased and dazzled our eyes. At this moment, leaning on the forecastle bulwark, I saw below me Ned Land gripping the martingale in one hand, brandishing his terrible harpoon in the other. Scarcely 20 feet from the motionless animal, suddenly his arm straightened and the harpoon was thrown. I heard the sonorous stroke of the weapon, which seemed to have struck a hard body. The electric light went out suddenly, and 2 enormous waterspouts broke over the bridge of the frigate, rushing like a torrent from stem to stern, overthrowing men and breaking the lashing of the spars. A fearful shock followed, and, thrown over the rail without having time to stop myself, I fell into the sea. Oh, he fell in the water. I think it's gonna go fine, y'all. We'll take a break for ads. I'm gonna hydrate and then we'll be back after the ads. I'm just gonna yap about nothing in the meantime. You love you some nothing? Well, that's majority of my content is I yap with no thought, head empty. No thought to filtering anything that comes out of my mouth, so it works, right? Till y'all point out what I've said. I'm like, I said that, really? It's news to me. I didn't even realize I said that. Dirty, dirty data, exactly. Love me some dirty, dirty data. I actually don't. I hate dirty data. Cleaning it's really annoying. There's nothing I hate more than a free text field when I'm having to data mine. It's like, please, no. Everything should be lists and oh, yeah. Or let's mix schemas of different things when we try to squish together data for you, so you have to tease them apart and do all sorts of yeah, dirty data. Mm. No thoughts, head empty. Very much so. Or for a brain not found. Brain's never found. Y'all enjoying the book so far? Feel like we took forever to get to the action, but we finally got to it. I can't believe it took them a day to realize they were never going to catch up to the narwhal. Ah, it's crazy. It's like, let's take the entire morning and part of the afternoon chasing this narwhal. Realize we'll never catch up with it. What is brain? I don't know. I've never figured that out. If you find out, let me know. There's a lot of swang dancing between boy and other boy. I'm surprised nobody commented on apparently the hot captain or commander and the harpooner that he was so enamored by. Like I guess his boy just never said anything about it. Just things that happen at sea, I guess. Welcome back from Mats, y'all. Chapter 7: An Unknown Species of Whale. This unexpected fall so stunned me that I have no clear recollection of sensations at that time. I was at first drawn down to a depth of about 20 feet. Was he bringing a measuring stick with him? How does he know he went down 20 feet? I'm a good swimmer, though without pretending to rival Byron or Edgar Poe, who were masters of the art. And in that plunge, I did not lose my presence of mind. 2 vigorous strokes brought me to the surface of the water. My first care was to look for the frigate. Had the crew seen me disappear? Had the Abraham Lincoln veered round? Would the captain put out a boat? Might I hope to be saved? The darkness was intense. I caught a glimpse of a black mass disappearing in the east, its beacon lights dying out in the distance. It was the frigate. I was lost. Help, help, I shouted, swimming towards the Abraham Lincoln in desperation. My clothes encumbered me. They seemed glued to my body and paralyzed my movements. I was sinking. I was suffocating. Help. This was my last cry, my mouth filled with water. I struggled against being drawn down the abyss. Suddenly, my clothes were seized by a strong hand, and I felt myself quickly drawn up to the surface of the sea, and I heard, yes, I heard these words pronounced in my ear. If Master would be so good as to lean on my shoulder, Master would swim with much greater ease. I seized with one hand my faithful Conseil's arm. Ah! Is it you? I said. You? Myself, answered Conseil, and waiting Master's orders. That shock threw you, as well as me, into the sea? No, but in being my master's service, I followed him. The worthy fellow thought that was but natural. And the frigate? I asked. The frigate, replied Conseil, turning on his back. I think that master had better not count too much on her. You think so? I say that at the time I threw myself into the sea, I heard the men at the wheel say, the screw and the rudder are broken. Broken? Yes, broken by the monster's teeth. It is the only injury the Abraham Lincoln has sustained, but it is a bad look out for us. She no longer answers her helm. Then we are lost. Perhaps so, calmly answered Consil. However, we still have several hours before us, and one can do a good deal in some hours. Consil's imperturbable coolness set me up again. I swam more vigorously, but cramped by my clothes, which stuck to me like leaden weight, felt great difficulty in bearing up. Consil saw this. Will master let me make a slit? Said he, and slipping an open knife under my clothes, he ripped them up from top to bottom very rapidly. Then he cleverly slipped them off me while I swam for both of us. Then I did the same for Consil, and we continued to swim nearer to each other. I know it's a survival, but I yeah. Sorry, I'll take myself out. Um, Nevertheless, our situation was no less terrible. Perhaps our disappearance had not been noticed, and if it had been, the frigate could not tack, being without its helm. Kinsale argued on this supposition and laid his plans accordingly. This phlegmatic boy was perfectly self possessed. We then decided that as our only chance of safety was being picked up on the Abraham Lincoln's boats, we ought to manage so as to wait for them as long as possible. I resolved then to husband our strength so both should not be exhausted at the same time. And this is how we managed. While one of us lay on our back, quite still, with arms crossed and legs stretched out, the other would swim and push the other in front. This towing business did not last more than 10 minutes each, and relieving each other thus, we could swim on for some hours, perhaps till daybreak, or chance, but hope is so firmly rooted in the heart of man. Moreover, there were two of us. Indeed, I declare, though it may seem improbable, that I sought to destroy all hope. If I wished to despair, I could not. The conclusion of the frigate was with the cetacean had occurred at about 11 o'clock the evening before. I reckon then we should have 8 hours to swim before sunrise, an operation quite practicable if we relieved each other. If you relieved each other, I know what you mean, but still, I'm reading too much into it. I'm sorry, I'll stop. The sea, very calm, was in our favor. Sometimes I tried to pierce the intense darkness that was only dispelled by the phosphorescence caused by our movements. I watched the luminous waves that broke over my hands, whose mirror-like surface was spotted with silvery rings. One might have said that we were in a bath of quicksilver. Near 1 o'clock in the morning, I was seized with a dreadful fatigue. My limbs had stiffened under the strain of violent cramp. Consil was obliged to keep me up, and our preservation devolved on him alone. I heard the poor boy pant. His breathing became short and hurried. I found that he could not keep up much longer. Leave me, I said to him. Leave my master? Never, replied he. I would drown first. Just then the moon appeared through the fringes of a thick cloud that the wind was driving to the east. The surface of the sea glittered with its rays. This kindly light reanimated us. My head got better again. I looked at all points of the horizon. I saw the frigate. She was 5 miles from us and looked like a dark mass, hardly discernible. But no boats? I would have cried out, but what good would it have been at such distance? True seamen relieve each other. Thank you, Sly. Saltwater sus time sounds frictiony. I would have cried out, but what good would it have done at such distance? My swollen lips could utter no sounds, Consul could articulate some words, and I heard him repeat at intervals, "Help, help." Our movements were suspended for an instant. For an instant, we listened. It might only be a singing in the ear, but it seemed to me as if a cry answered the cry for Conceal. "Did you hear?" I murmured. "Yes, yes." And Conceal gave one more despairing call. This time there was no mistake. A human voice responded to ours. Was it the voice of another unfortunate creature abandoned in the middle of the ocean? Some other victim of the shock sustained by the vessel? Or rather, was it a boat from the frigate that was hailing us in the darkness? Conseil made a last effort, leaning on my shoulder, while I struck out in a despairing effort. He raised himself half out of the water, then fell back exhausted. "What did you see?" "I saw," murmured he. "I saw, but do not talk. Reserve all your strength." "What had he seen?" Then, I know not why, the thought of the monster came into my head for the first time. But that voice! The time has passed for Jonas to take refuge in whales' bellies. However, Conseil was towing me again. He raised his head sometimes, looked before us, and uttered a cry of recognition, which was responded to by a voice that came nearer and nearer. I scarcely heard it. My strength was exhausted. My fingers stiffened. My hand afforded me support no longer. My mouth convulsively opening, filled with salt water. Cold crept over me. I raised my head for the last time. Then I sank. At this moment, a hard body struck me. I clung to it. Then I felt I was being drawn up, that I was being brought to the surface of the water, that my chest collapsed. I fainted. It is certain. As soon as I came to, thanks to the vigorous rubbings I received. He's getting CPR. Y'all, stop being dirty-minded. I half opened my eyes. "Conceal," I murmured. "Does master call me?" asked Conceal. Just then, by the waning light of the moon, which was sinking down to the horizon, I saw a face which was not Conceal's, and which I immediately recognized. "Ned!" I cried. "The same, sir, who is seeking his prize," replied the Canadian. "Were you thrown into the sea by the shock of the frigate?" "Yes, Professor. More fortunate than you, I was able to find a footing almost directly upon a floating island." "An island? Or more correctly speaking, on our gigantic narwhal. Explain yourself, Ned." "Only I soon find out why my harpoon had not entered its skin and was blunted." "Why, Ned, why?" "Because, Professor, that beast is made of a sheet iron." The Canadian's last word produced a sudden revolution in my brain. I wriggled myself quickly to the top of the being or object, half out of the water, which served us for a refuge. I kicked it. It was evidently a hard, impenetrable body, not the soft substance that forms the bodies of the great marine mammalia. But this hard body might be a bony carapace, like that of the antediluvian animals, and I should be free to class this monster among amphibious reptiles, such as tortoises or alligators. Well, no. The blackish back that supported me was smooth, polished, without scales, and the blow produced a metallic sound. Incredible though it may be, it seems, I might say, as if it was made of riveted plates. There was no doubt about it. This monster, this natural phenomenon that had puzzled the learned world, was overthrown and misled the imagination of seamen of both hemispheres. It must be owned a still more astonishing phenomenon, inasmuch as it were simply human construction. We had no time to lose, however. We were lying on the back of a sort of submarine boat, which appeared, as far as I could judge, like a huge fish of steel. Ned Land's mind was made up at this point. Conseil and I could only agree with him. Just then a bubbling began at the back of this strange thing, which was evidently propelled by a screw, and it began to move. We had only just time to seize hold of the upper part, which rose about 7 feet out of water, and happily its speed was not great. As long as it sails horizontally, murmured Ned Land, I do not mind. But if it takes a fancy to dive, I would not give 2 straws for my life. The Canadian might well have said less. It became really necessary to communicate with the beings, whatever they were, shut up inside the machine. I searched all over the outside for an aperture, a panel, or a man made hold, to use as a technical expression, but the lines of iron rivets solidly driven into the joints of the iron plates were clear and uniform. Besides, the moon disappeared then and left us in total darkness. At last, this long night passed. My indistinct remembrance prevents my describing all the impressions it made. I can only recall one circumstance. During some lulls of wind and sea, I fancy I heard several times vague sounds, a sort of fugitive harmony produced by the words of command. What was the mystery of this submarine craft, of which the whole world vainly sought an explanation? What kind of beings existed in this strange boat? What mechanical agent caused its prodigious speed? Daybreak appeared. The morning mists surrounded us, but they soon cleared off. I was about to examine the hull, which formed on deck a kind of horizontal platform, when I felt it gradually sinking. Oh, confound it, cried Ned, kicking the resounding plate. Open, you inhospitable rascals! Happily, the sinking movement ceased. Suddenly, a noise like ironworks violently pushed aside came from the interior of the boat. One iron plate was moved. A man appeared, uttered an odd cry, and disappeared immediately. Some moments after, 8 strong men with masked faces appeared noiselessly and drew us down into their formidable machine. Dun dun dun. All along, it was a submarine. It was a submarine. How did they mistake a submarine for a narwhal? I will never understand. I guess, like, and they know of the existence, like, they submarines already exist. Is it because it had lights on the exterior, which I don't know that submarines at that time had lights on the exterior? Maybe lanterns or whatnot? Interesting. Interesting. I think we're gonna leave that here today, though. What say you guys? Shall we find somebody? Shall we find somebody to go bug? Let's see what we got going on.